Now, an Iranian committee monitoring the implementation of the nuclear deal has stressed Tehran's powerful response to the recent U.S. sanctions. During a meeting on Monday, the committee chaired by President Hassan Rouhani discussed Washington's recent actions against Iran. The committee noted that the U.S. sanctions clearly violate Washington's obligations under the 2015 landmark nuclear deal. It stressed the necessity of a strong, appropriate, and intelligent response to the measure. The committee also made some decisions in reaction to U.S. provocative measures, which will be handed over to Iran's foreign ministry and the International Atomic Energy Agency. Last week, the U.S. Congress approved fresh sanctions against Iran over its missile program. Let's speak to Tony Gosling. He's an investigative journalist and he joins us via Skype from Bristol. Many thanks for joining us here on Press TV, Mr. Gosling. Now, this was predicted earlier as well that if it's not Iran's nuclear program, then there'll be some other excuse that the U.S. will use to impose sanctions on the country.
Iran needs to feel guilty in any way because the Americans seem to be dishing out sanctions like they're going out of fashion. In all sorts of countries, obviously, they're ramping up tensions in the South China Sea, in North Korea, in Ukraine, in Syria. Also, we've just heard about Venezuela and Russia too. But it seems that and it's actually, I suppose, good to see that there are actually counter moves being made against the United States from Russia, particularly expelling all these diplomats, and now with Iran actually saying, well, we're not going to take this lying down, because everyone is trying to go out their way to be accommodating to the United States, and it's proving almost impossible. What's been happening over the last few months in America is very worrying, with the appointment of this general, John Kelly, who's the White House Chief of Staff. It's almost like a kind of coup in the United States, a military government with a military general as the Chief of Staff at the White House. This is extremely worrying. Nobody seems to be really reporting this over in the world. Of course, John Kelly was a general in an illegal war in Iraq. This is not the sort of person that should be trusted at all, of course, particularly since he may be facing war crimes trials in the future.
So, Mr. Gosling, you're saying that from now onwards, we're going to see decisions in the White House being made by Kelly?
Well, look, in an interview I did with a chap called John Ford, who used to be Peter Ford, who used to be the British ambassador to Syria, he said that Trump has never said no to a uniform. This is really worrying. I mean, the guy's a property developer, and yet he's surrounding himself by military generals. He's way out of his depth, Trump, I think, when it comes to these big decisions, and he's just ceding his policy to these hawks, many of whom, as I said, may be potentially war criminals. So let's also remember that sanctions are not just sanctions, they are a form of warfare. Economic sanctions, IMF have used them in the past, by the way, making the economy scream in countries that it didn't like, and those sanctions have a massive effect on the population. But the Saker, who's a former UN military advisor, has explained in a very good article he wrote just before Christmas, that 80% of warfare now is psychological. That's the media. So we've seen attempts to close down Al Jazeera, for example, recently. And 15% of warfare nowadays is economic. So that's what's happening now, is we're seeing another wave of economic warfare from the United States.
Okay, that's Tony Gosling, investigative journalist, joining us via Skype from Bristol. Mr. Gosling, it's always good to have you with us here on Press TV.